I get it, making candles can be quite challenging. Wicks, fragrance, wax, vessels, there's so many different things to consider. Now on this video, I'm going to show you everything you need to know on how to make one of these. A 20cl tin candle. Welcome everyone, I'm Reese, I'm one half of the Caird company. We are a skincare and fragrance brand, and on this channel we talk about everything that's involved in running our part-time business. If you like what we do here, then please remember to subscribe and like this video, but other than that, let's get into the video. So like I said, today we are going to talk about everything that is required in making one of these. This is a 20cl candle, tin obviously, and it comes with a nice little lid. Now if you're new to candle making, I would suggest that this is actually quite an ideal candle to start with. One, it ships really easily, it's metal obviously. Two, it already comes with a lid. It's pretty versatile. I don't want to say it's hard to get it wrong, but it's kind of hard to get it wrong. And the fact that it's metal is actually quite forgiving when it comes to different aspects of tunneling and melt pool and things we'll talk about as we get further into this video and further into this channel. But definitely if you're new to candle making, this is an ideal candidate to start with. Now before we get into making the candle, let's look at all the ingredients that are required to produce the perfect candle. Okay, so what we've got here is the basic ingredients that you need to make a basic candle. Now, there are a couple of other bits and pieces, certainly other equipment, which I'm not going to go into too much detail just now. That will come in further videos. But if you have these individual components, you can't go wrong really. So let's start from this side and work our way along. So this is the vessel, as we've already talked about. Candles, you could do them in tin candles, you could do them in glass, you could do them in jam jars, which are very popular. For this video, we're going to be doing it in the 20cl candle. You need some fragrance. This fragrance we get from Candle Shack. This is a lovely lavender fragrance, which we're going to use today. Candle Shack are a great supplier. We get a lot of our components from Candle Shack. Not all of them, but we get a lot of them from Candle Shack. Now you can use fragrance, you can use essential oils. It's all dependent on the type of candle that you're wanting to do. And for today, we're going to be using fragrance. Next up, you can't have a candle without wax. Now, I've just chucked some wax into this little ramekin coaster thing. Wax, again, there's so many different variant types of waxes, which we will talk about in future videos. Wax will come normally either in flake form, like this, or pellet form, or sometimes in slab form as well. We normally get our wax in flake form. It makes it actually really easy to control the amount of weight that you're putting in there. It melts very quickly as well, which I have found, where if you have a slab of wax, that could take quite a while to melt. And for us, the flake form, it works for our needs. Now the next piece of ingredient, this isn't really ingredient, this is a piece of equipment. And I've put this here just because it's actually really important to make sure that you get a good melt and a good straight melt when it comes to the wick. I'll explain that later on. This little bow tie type thing sits on top of the candle. Let me show you. To make sure that your wick is centered once you're doing the pouring. Is it absolutely critical? I would say it is actually, because it allows you to get a nice even melt. Is it important and critical that you have this specific bow tie one? No, it's not. You can use a clothing peg, you can use chopsticks, you can use pieces of stick, you can use almost anything to keep it straight. This one's neat because you're able to nip it in and tighten it with this aspect. So I put this down here because I do think it's quite important. Maybe not critical, you can use something else. Now the next ingredient, again, this isn't really an ingredient, this is more a piece of equipment, but you can't make a candle in my opinion without one of these. Now this is just an adhesive pad which you'll sit the wick onto and then fix it into the jar, which I'll show you how to do. This is massively critical because if you don't have one of these and you don't have a good one, your wick can come detached from the vessel and just, once it starts melting, float away to the top and then your candle's out. So you've either got, you're unhappy with how you made your candle, or you've got worse, unhappy customers. So make sure you get some good adhesive pads. And then the other component, the bit that's going to bring a bit of light to it, is obviously, it's a wick. Now again, these are CL14 wicks that we get from Candle Shack. We get them in packs of 100. Great wick. Again, obviously we've done so many different variant types of testing on this vessel, and the CL14 is the one that works with us with our fragrance and with our wax. and it works with our combination of fragrance and wax and vessel. Now these are all the component parts or the main ingredients that you need to make a candle. Let's show you how you prep your vessel to start off on the right foot. Now prepping your vessel is a very important aspect, and I sometimes think it gets overlooked by people, certainly people that are just starting out. Now if you get a self-contained tin like this, there's a really good chance that nothing's going to get in there. It's going to be shipped by the manufacturer to you with the lid on. You know, they're processed in such a way that they're already quite clean, but sometimes they're almost too clean, and what you might not get is a good adhesion with adhesive pad. So what I do is I grab a bit of isopropanol 99.9%. It's basically alcohol spray. A bit of the old kitchen roll, and we do this with every one of our vessels. A little spray, not too much, and just give it a little clean on the inside. Now we do it for the metal and we do it for the glass jars as well. Probably more important for the glass jars because they can get a little bit dirty over time, but also it's important for these to make sure that you just start to be able to get that. Can you hear that? Start to be able to get a bit of purchase. I've had it before where I've not done that, stuck my wick in with adhesive pad, and it's detached over time because it's just not got a good bond. So put in a little bit of extra effort to give it a bit of a clean, and then you should it should set you up on the right foot. So once you've cleaned the inside of the jar, pop that away. All you need to do, and this is something that I've had to work on a lot, is making sure that you get your wick centered. Okay, so before we center the wick, you get your wick. You simply peel off the adhesive. There we go. Peel off a little sticky tab. I made that look difficult, didn't I? Stick on the wick. Now, if you're doing multiple candles, which we obviously do, a good easy tip here is to leave that on there. Peel off all the tabs and chuck all your wicks on, so then you end up with a big hedgehog looking thing. Looks a little bit silly and it falls over, but it's so easy for you to then pull the wicks off and just chuck them in the vessels, just sort of speeding up the process. But today we're just doing one. So we've got our wick attached to adhesive pad. Peel it off real easy. Let's put that over there. Now I've not got shaky hands, but I've not got the best. I struggle to get this centered, so I really have to concentrate. There are tools out there which I'm needing to buy, which allows you to just plunge the wick straight into the center of the vessel. Let's have a go at this, and I'll let you critique how in the middle I can get this. So let me concentrate for a second. I think that's pretty good. Now, once you've got it centered in there, you just want to press it down. I'll give you a little tip. When it's these metal tins that you use, don't press too hard, because you can actually concave the candle, which then means the candle is going to like spin about and it might be a little bit wobbly. So what I do is I put fingers on both sides, press down, and just rotate it around there. What you're wanting to achieve is a nice strong bond with the wick and the candle, so that you should be able to reasonably pull on that and nothing happen, which we've got there. Great adhesive pads, great wick, and great vessel as well. So now we've prepped our candle for success. We've got the wick nicely centered. What we need to do now is we need to actually start making this candle properly. So we need to get melting the wax. But again, if you're new to candle making, let me just break down really quickly how you can make candles at home using just bits of equipment that you've got lying around. So here's our big girl, just a big pot. Now we bought this pot specifically, but if you've got an old pot lying around that you don't use anymore for cooking, of course use that. I would make sure that you delineate what is going to be candle vessels and what's cooking vessels, because you don't want to mix them in between. So as soon as you're making it for candles, mark it up, keep it separately, keep it away so nobody uses it for any sort of food. Now, what we do, and what you can certainly do to begin with, is the double boiler method, or bain-marie in the UK it gets called. You've got your candle pots. They then go into a bain-marie, which is just boiling hot water, inside a vessel. the hot water melts the wax, but it melts it gently, because technically you could pop that straight on a stove, on a hot pot, or on a conduction oven thing, and it will melt the wax quite quickly, but it might melt the wax too quickly. And if you turn your back on it, you could end up with stuck wax at the bottom, all melted, turning brown. You don't want that. The bain-marie works nice and smooth. It's easy for you to be able to step away quickly, but keep an eye on it. So it's quite a safe method as well. It's certainly a method I would suggest if you're just starting out with candle making. Now these little candle pots, I would say, are quite critical. You can buy one of these off Amazon for about, I don't know, 16, 17 quid. Don't buy the £9 ones, because you'll end up with a loose handle, or it just won't be very good quality. Spend a little bit of money on it so you get a decent bit of equipment. And other than that, some sort of method to stir the wax. Nice and simple. So now what we need to do is we need to actually start to prep this candle. Now, apologies for the angle if this isn't very good, but we're in the studio and I'm stuck around loads of different bottles. Now, what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to make 3 candles, I've decided, because I don't want to just melt one candle's worth of wax, because it's hardly anything. So, first we need to get all our wax into our little candle pot here. This is going to be, that's my cam that we're making today. So for us, we're going to need 447 grams of wax. So let me grab that. Now what I do is I weigh up the vessel, tear it so it goes to 0, and then we're just going to fill up 447 grams of wax. We should be getting there. Oh, actually, it's still far off. Oh, we're getting close. And then the final bits here. Ah, a little bit over. There we go. Now once you've measured out your wax, you then need to measure out your fragrance. Now, I'm not going to go into too much depth about the amount of wax, the amount of fragrance. That will all come in different videos, and I will talk you through, it's probably going to be a longer video, but I'll talk you through exactly the percentage of fragrance load, etc, etc. I'm going to give you one little top tip here, especially if you have a beard or a mustache, is if you're going to be handling fragrance, put some gloves on, because there's nothing worse than getting this concentrated fragrance on your hands. You then touch your mustache, you touch your beard, and your beard will stink of that fragrance for about 3 days. It's not a bad thing, but it's also it's not a great thing, because it's pretty strong. So let me grab some gloves real quick. Gloves are on. Right, just the exact same thing here is measure up the vessel that you're going to use and tear it. Now, again, in a little top tip is just whack one of these on top of your scales, because this fragrance stuff has got a tendency to just drip all over the place. And as you know, as nice as it smells, you just don't want it everywhere. So now all we need for this one is about 39 grams of fragrance. Oh yes, right, 39. We're in business. Now once you've measured out your wax, your fragrance, now what you need to do is go and make the candle. Now as you can see here, all we've done is we've added a pot with some hot water, and I'll show you that in a second, our vessel with the wax in, put it on a low, gentle, medium heat. What we're going to do is just let the water get up to temperature, melt the wax, give it a good stir, and hey presto, we're cooking. Well, not literally cooking, we're making candles. Now one thing I didn't mention is the use of this. This is it's a thermometer. There's many different types. This is the one we use. It's electronic, and it gives you a very accurate reading of the wax. Now, wax temperature is actually really, really important. When you're first making candles, is it massively necessary? Well, I actually would say it is. Is it necessary you have one of these? No, it's not. You can use any thermometer, but you have to have a good, accurate temperature of the wax, because there's 2 really main bits, which I will explain when we go back to the studio. This is just an example of how you can make candles in your house. We've got a specific wax melting, like big soup kettle thing. But if you just have pots and pans in the house and you just want to make a few candles, you can easily do this. And as you can see, the wax is not melted yet, but it will do very soon. What you'll actually find is when you're melting small levels of wax like this is, the wax actually melts really quickly, especially when it's in flake. If you remember what I said, flake melts very quickly compared to pellet. So you've got to make sure you keep an eye on it, give it a good stir, and try to get it up to that special temperature. Okay, so what we've done is we've melted the wax is melted. We normally melt it up to 185, 186, something like that. But what you're really looking for is you're looking for the wax to be completely clear, well obviously not clear like water, candle colour, which is kind of a yellowish colour. Completely clear, completely free of any solids. Melt it up to about 180, 185 degrees. Take it off the boil and then start to let it cool. Now, depending on your fragrances, depends on what temperature you then pour your fragrances at. We tend to go for somewhere around 150, 155 degrees for our fragrance. But you really have to do suitable testing to make sure that your hot throw, your cold throw isn't affected by the temperature that you pour your fragrance. Now, if you're just starting out with candles, that might sound like gobbledygook to you. Don't worry about it too much. Find a temperature that is suitable for the fragrance, and you can do a bit of research on Google, and then just go for that from there. The more you make candles, the more you'll figure out the correct temperatures that you need to then start to pour your fragrance in. Now, one of the good things about these little candle vessels is that they actually hold the heat quite well. So you want to be taking it off the heat, putting it on a coaster. I would also suggest that if you are new to candles, you potentially wear goggles, always have safety first, and then just stir the wax, making sure it's away from your face and away from your skin and away from any pets and any children. And just keep stirring it till it comes down to that temperature. So we'll give it a quick check. That's down to 164, if you're able to see that. Give it a couple more stirs and it should come down to temperature. Now, hard and fast may be required in some areas of life, but slow is required when it comes to stirring candles. The last thing you want to do is create bubbles in your candles. That's something you're really trying to avoid. Bubbles can really affect it when you come to pouring the vessel or pouring the candle into the vessel. You can end up with air pockets. You really don't want them. Now, most waxes are actually designed to try and prevent those, but you can certainly help yourself if you just go nice and slow when it comes to stirring your candle. So that is now 140 degrees, which means we are going to get this fragrance in real quick. So all you do is you get your fragrance, pour it in. Make sure you get every last drop of that fragrance in there because you've measured that out exact. You want to make sure it all gets in there. Now, just continue to stir it until it gets down to the temperature that you're wanting to pour it at. Now, you're going to want to make sure that you stir this, not vigorously again, not vigorously. You want to make sure that you just stir this continuously to make sure that that fragrance and wax is getting mixed up real nice. The last thing you want to do is not mix it properly. You end up with a fragrance layer. Your candle can do things like sweating out and doing all sorts of naughty stuff. But depending on what part of the country you're in, we're in a coldish part of the country, certainly not the coldest part of the country. Your wax can cool down pretty quickly depending on if you're wealthy enough to put the heating on at this time of the year. And judging by the prices of the heating, I don't think anybody can afford to put it on just now. So my wax is cooling down pretty quickly, also hence the jumper. Once it gets down to the pouring temperature, that's ready to pour. Now, take your spoon out, make sure you get every last drop off. When it comes to your vessels, some people preheat their vessels. I've certainly found for tin vessels, there's no need for that because it retains the heat really well. Now comes the pouring method. All you want to do is come down to the candle, pour it nice and slowly, making sure that you can try and avoid any air pockets. Pour it all the way up to the fill line. Stop. Do the next one. This is where a steady hand comes into play. Pour it nice and slowly, avoiding all the air pockets. Happy with that. And then this is going to be an awkward one. Here we go. Again, slow and controlled, pouring it in all the way to the top. So there you have it, 3 perfectly poured candles. You've got the setters on so your wicks will stay nice and straight. Now all you've got to do is just leave them for time to cure. Now depending on the fragrance, depending on the wax, depending on the temperature of your house, depending on the temperature that you poured them at, will depend how long it takes for them to solidify. I normally suggest you put them somewhere safe, certainly out of the reach of kids, again, any pets or anything, and certainly out of the way that you won't have to continuously move them. And I would leave them for about 12 hours a day, sometimes 2 days, and then we'll snip off the wick. So set your candle aside somewhere safe and then give it a couple of days and then we'll come back to them. Now this is not the candle that we poured. This is another candle which I poured using the exact same method. The candles that we poured are still trying to dry. Now what I've done off camera, and I should have done on camera, was trim the wick. What you want to do is you can use a pair of scissors, nail clippers. You could buy special candle snipping scissor things. I just use nail clippers because they're nice and sharp and they're really neat at getting in there. What you want to make sure that you're leaving is at least ½ centimetre, depending on what part of the world you're from. I think it's 1/3 inch. I certainly go for between ½ centimetre and 1 centimetre of wick, and that looks something like that. If you can just see that over my bald head. That makes sure that you've got enough wick to get the candle going, but not too much wick to overwhelm the candle straight away and start to create things like mushrooms and things like that on the end of the wick, which we'll talk about in other videos. But I've given this candle has taken about, I think we give it about 3 days normally to set completely. Then it'll be fine to use. I think some people say you can use it after 24 hours, but I certainly give it at least 3 days before we even think about lighting it. And there you go. That's the basic information that you'll need to get you going at home making one of these 20cl candles. Now if you liked this video and you liked our vibe, please subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out setting out. This is our first ever video, so a thumbs up would also help out. If you're just starting out on your own candle making journey or your small business venture, leave something in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. And I've very much got my ego in check, so if I said anything that's not correct or you think differently, also let me know. I'd love to hear some sort of feedback from other people on how they make their candles. But other than that, that's everything from me. I hope you have a great week and don't forget to trim your wick.